Good morning. Today is Sunday, February 24th. The Gospel lectionary reading is from Luke, begins in verse 27 and goes through verse 38. But I say to you that listen, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you. Pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. If anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs of you. And if anyone takes away your goods, don't ask for them back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those that love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you hope to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. But love your enemies, do good and lend expecting nothing in return. Your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High. For he is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father in heaven is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back. This is a heady text. This is Luke's version of the Didache. Matthew's version is known as the Sermon on the Mount. This is Luke's Sermon on the Plain. We saw last week the blessings and the woes. This week we get the meat, the heart of the matter. There is so much here to unpack, friends. Normally I keep a sermon to 20 minutes, and so what I'm going to have to do is I'm just going to have to make references to other videos I've done. You'll have to go there to get the larger exegesis. Let's begin. First of all, let's acknowledge what we're dealing here is with economies of exchange. Has to do with giving and receiving, doesn't it? What do you give? What do you receive? What's the relationship between giving and receiving? Now, of course, our charismatic friends love to go to the end of this passage and they go, give and it will be given to you, good measure shaken together, support my ministry. Please sow and seed into my ministry. You send $100 today and I will promise to pray for you at least for 30 seconds one day. Yes, sometime in the future. Indeed, just send me their money. That's God. You give to me, and God will give back to you. We know all the nonsense they do. The utter nonsense of this prosperity gospel approach to this. The fact is, you don't get to this text until you get to the prior text. The prior text about forgiving others is before this. Loving your enemies is before this. Lending without expecting in return is before this. You don't get any of this business of good measure, pressed down, shaken, until you're part of the new economy. And this is the problem with the entire prosperity gospel and their use of a text like this, is they have taken it and removed it from the new economy. The new economy has nothing to do with economies of exchange. And we need to, this is what we're going to unpack today. But our charismatic friends don't get this. They're embedded in a sacrificial economy of exchange. And so they use a text like this, and it's completely misunderstood, because you don't get the promise here until you've engaged in the ethics. It's the ethics and the engagement of the ethics that create the promise. Now some are going to go, oh, you're saying we have to obey the law before we get the gospel. I'm saying you have to follow Jesus all the way. You don't get to follow Jesus just the way you want. You don't get to pick and choose the parts of his gospel that you want. And if you want the blessing, you have to carry the cross. And carrying the cross means a new economy of exchange. What does it look like? Well, we all know that economies of exchange have to do with giving and receiving. I give to you, so you will give back to me. And we have a happy relationship that way. So, for example, I have a friend here that's joined. He'll know who I'm talking about. He invited us to go visit his cabin in Michigan one year, and we had a lovely 20th wedding celebration. Hi, you know who you are. Anyway, This friend of mine has, I've just been using an example here. I could use a lot of folks, but I'm just using this one friend. He's made some gifts to me, right? And this is our friendship. And I've made some little gifts back, and that's how friends do. You share with each other. You got something, you got, a new book you want to share, a new idea, a new place to eat, this, that. We share things back and forth, don't we? Okay, so that's a relationship. It's a marriage. That's how marriage works. That's how any significant relationship works. Everybody's giving and taking and receiving and back and forth and back and forth. Christmas, you buy presents for people, the expectation is they will buy them for you. You go visit somebody's house, the expectation is you're bringing a bottle of wine or a pastry from the bakery. We live in an economy of exchange. Everything. Hi, how are you? I put my hand out. I'm expecting something in return. I'm expecting a handshake. Our whole existence is built up in this giving-receiving thing. And so when we talk about the modern economy and money, that's only a part of the economy of exchange. Money is only a part. Money is just one thing that we exchange. We also know from mimetic theory that we exchange desires all the time. We're exchanging anger and hostility all the time. Anger, it's funny. You look at a family system, you look at work, one person is angry, and if they manage to pass that anger on to another so that another gets angry, then the first person that passed it on is not so angry. We pass it on. We push it around. We don't want it. And the same is true with love. And that's what Jesus is trying to point out here, is that there is always going to be an economy. The question is whether it's an economy of exchange, which is how the world functions, going back to the scapegoat mechanism, all the way back to that. All economies of exchange, they're all grounded in this exchange we make when we scapegoat. Everything else comes from that. But in the new economy is known as grace. Grace is where you give with no expectation of receiving in return. You simply give. You don't hope that you'll get something back. You don't have expectations of what the person does with the gift. You give because you're a giver, not because of what you've attached to the gift. Do you see that? And so you let it go. When you give a gift, you let it go. It's not yours anymore. It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the other person to do with as they freely choose. That's how the gospel comes to us. It is all grace. Now, it's more than just that, because in our relationships, which are fractured and broken, if we are in economies of exchange, we are always going to be looking for justice. Somebody hurts us, and we have to right that wrong. Whether we call them out on it, whether we get in a fight with them over it, we are always seeking justice. All of us. We want it. We need to be right. We need to be in right relationship, and the only way we know how to be in right relationship is to be in an argument or win a fight where we can prove we're right because we won. That's not right relationships, because it creates winners and losers. In an economy of exchange, there are only winners and losers. But in an economy of grace, there are only winners. Because in an economy of grace, the one who's hurt goes to the one who did the hurting and just freely forgives. I forgive you. I know you don't know what you're doing. You don't say that to somebody, of course, but you know it in your heart. You've separated action and intention, right? Like we've taught in atonement. You can go look at my essay on that. We separate these things, and so when people hurt us, we don't take it personally. We don't take it personally. We just let it go right past us because they don't know what they're doing. And we forgive them. And we love them in spite of what they're doing. Eventually, that love will conquer. If you do good to those who do good to you, what good is that to you? If you only love your friends, what good is that to you? See, this is now where the rubber meets the road. This is the ethic. This is the new economy of exchange. And this, by the way, is something American Christianity does not get in toto. The whole thing is locked out of this. Oh yeah, the Christians want to claim that their God is gracious and they have a gospel of grace and it's all about grace and this and that and the other, but they don't want to follow it through. And I want to point out something to you I mentioned in the Jesus-Driven Life. I don't remember which theologian I used. It could have been Regatz, I don't recall, but it's in the Jesus-Driven Life, and I observed that, it might have been Flusser, David Flusser, the Jewish New Testament scholar, but one of those guys said, and you can find it in there, that Jesus' eschatology was derived from his ethics. And anybody that thinks his ethics was derived from his eschatology has to be an ivory tower professor. What the writer was saying by that is this: Jesus first understood the relationality and the ethical component of what a grace economy looks like. And then from that, that is, when I forgive everybody now, and I love everybody now, well, what does eschatology look like? That's the move. Ethics first, eschatology second. That's also an Anabaptist move, and James McClendon has done this in his 3-volume Systematic Theology, where he begins with ethics, then moves to doctrine, and then finally to vision, mission, as it were. So the whole point here in this sermon, the whole point of this text is for us to understand that there is a new way of relating, a new way of being in the reign of God that has nothing to do with the way the world relates. And this is the hardest thing for people to get in Christianity. It's the most difficult thing, and it's the first essential step, because without this ethic, there is no eschatology, there is no theology, there is no spirituality. You cannot live and understand and pray and worship the Christian life. You can't do this Christian life thing apart from this ethic. This ethic is everything. It is the way. It is the path of discipleship. And that's why this phrase, love your enemies, occurs across the board in every single category of Christian didache that one can find. It occurs here. It occurs in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew. One finds it in Romans 12, the Epistle to Barnabas, the didache. The early Christians understood that you had to love your enemy. It had to work out right there. We've seen in Luke 4 how that played out for Jesus, didn't he? When he said you got to go love your enemies, in Luke 4 they wanted to kill him. Nobody wants to hear about love of enemy. They don't. Nobody wants to hear about doing good to those who hurt you or blessing those who curse you. They don't want to do that because they seek justice. Justice is the key word in Christianity today. It's all about justice, and justice is just another form of Torah obedience, folks. If you seek justice, then all you are seeking really is retribution that you can justify. That's all you're seeking. The entire progressive Christian movement, a justice-oriented movement, claims to be following the gospel, claims to be following Jesus, claims to be following the Bible, claims to be following the prophetic tradition, claims to say that Jesus is a prophet, that we must follow him, and speaking truth to principalities and powers, and we seek justice, but they don't love their enemies. They don't do good to those who hate them. They don't bless those who curse them. They hate them. You can see it in their posts and in their blogs on pathos.com and in their books. You can see it in the marches and in the protests and the counter-protests. Hate runs strong in Christianity today in America. Not this ethic. This ethic you will hardly find anywhere. It's like searching for a needle in a haystack. But when you do find persons that follows this ethic, you know you have found Jesus. That's the first part. As long as you're in the reign of God and you continue to exist as though the reign of God consists of economies of exchange, you don't know Jesus. You don't know the gospel, and you're not living the Christian life. Grace is an ethic, and then it's a theology, and then it's an eschatology, and then there's the blessing. The blessing follows the ethic. So until you're loving your enemy, until you're forgiving those who persecute you, until you are doing good to those who don't treat you well, and until you lend to those and give away to those who cannot pay you back, with no expectation of them paying you back. You're just giving. Till you're doing that, you have no right for the second part of the pressed down, shaken together, overflowing. Second, Jesus says your reward will be great. Here's the eschatology part. You give it to God. You live your life, you follow Jesus, you do good to those who hate you, you bless those who curse you, and you give it to God. You simply let the Father knows. The Father watches, the Father lives with you. You know this. And all this is seen by the Father. And when you do that, Jesus says, you will be like the Most High. And then he ends his didache, not with Matthew's, you must be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect, but he ends it with, be merciful. Here's the new holiness code, as it were. And again, this is in the Jesus-driven life. Be merciful. as your Father in heaven is merciful. That is, the Christian and the Christian community ought to be known as the community of mercy. They're not, because they're so oriented to law. They got stuck in law. They got stuck in law everywhere. Look at the whole history of Christianity stuck in law. Even the people that claim to be in the grace movement and the finished works movement and all of this, they're all stuck in law. They're all stuck in a sacrificial paradigm, and they don't know it. They can't see it, but they're stuck there. And this gospel says if you want to get out of it, the way you do it is to enter into the economy of grace, and you show mercy, and then you're like God. And then the writer continues, or the sermon continues here in Luke, do not judge, and you will not be judged. It's that simple. If you think of your eschatology, and you think eschatology contains judgment, you remove the judgment from your own personal eschatology by not engaging in judgment in the present. You remove condemnation in your eschatology, your own personal eschatology, by not condemning in the present. It's not for us to judge. We don't know what it's like to walk in anybody's shoes, and you don't know what it's like to walk in mine. And I can't be expected to walk in your shoes, and I can't expect you to walk in mine. But I can show you mercy, and you can show me mercy. And we can learn to live together and be reconciled as brothers and sisters in Jesus because of this new economy of exchange. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Now, this is saying, listen to this, forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and you will be given. But what comes first? First, you have a whole ethic of loving your enemy, don't you? Do good to those, lend to those. You break free of the economy of exchange into an economy of grace. Then you're merciful like your Father in heaven is merciful. Now you're a child of the Most High. And so as a child of the Most High, you don't judge or condemn anyone. That's not your job. And you forgive all those who come in your life that hurt you. Then you give. And there will be a blessing. It may not come back as money, people. Jesus doesn't say it's going to come back as money. Might, I don't know. But the blessing has to do with the new relationships that are established in an economy of grace. And I have experienced this overwhelmingly from my Facebook friends, many of you who are here today. What it's like to be the recipient of your grace and your gifts, and then to be able to give to others freely. It's such a huge, enormous, wonderful experience to share this way. This is the gospel. It's in a nutshell right here. It's not about believing in Jesus. It's not about 4 spiritual laws and the bullshit that goes with that and getting your one-way ticket into heaven. It's not about believing the right doctrines and all the stuff that people think you need to have in your head. It's simply about your relationships. You want the gospel, just live it out. How do you live it out? Well, this morning, when somebody says an unkind word or snaps at you, and you can feel it rise up inside you like, I'm going to snap back, before you do that, just remember Jesus forgiving you. Just remember that. How important is it that you are forgiven? And then just let that flow through you to the other. That's all it takes. The gospel is about peace and reconciled relationships and restoration and the economy of grace, which is just so free and freeing and liberating. I wish my Protestant friends could understand this. I wish my liberal progressive friends could understand this. I wish my evangelical fundamentalist friends could understand this. I wish they would all stop playing games in their churchy environments and in their fake intellectual environments and in their faux Christian theological thinking. I wish they would all stop and repent and follow Jesus. I wish they would all take this seriously, because if they did, the face of Christianity in America would change. We would look different, we would be different, we would act different, we would look like Jesus. This is the hope. This is the gospel. This is our didache. This is how we are called to live, not as the world lives, in economies of exchange, but truly as children of grace, children who've been shown mercy, children who've been shown love, and children who then follow the Father and do the same with others. And then we receive the blessing. I look forward to seeing you next week.